Okay, so someone commented this in the comments, and I think we need to cover it because it's very, very stark evidence in the matter. So it's just going to be a quick video. We're going to look through a document, and I'm going to link the actual document in the comments below. You can go and read the rest of the pamphlet that comes along with it. And this is going to clarify something very, very, very clear here, in that we have a poisons register in this country which would define what a poison is. And we have a poisons hotline in this country where you can ring and ask questions about things you may have swallowed or touched that may be a poison, just to get some advice on what to do about a poison. So let's just quickly have a look at a document. Public Health Act 2016, Western Australia. Instrument of authorisation. Authorisation to supply or administer a poison. SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, Australian Defence Force, number 7, 2021. The World Health Organization declared a pandemic on 11th of March 2020, and on the 23rd of March 2020, the Minister for Health declared a public health state of emergency with effect from 1:30 p.m. on the 23rd of March 2020 in respect of, pursuant to Section 167 of the Public Health Act 2016, Act in brackets, on the 22nd of September 2021, the Minister for Health declared a further public health state of emergency with effect from 4:25 p.m. on the 22nd of September 2021 in respect of, pursuant to Section 167 of the Act. The public health state of emergency applies to the state of Western Australia. I, Dr. Andrew Robertson, Chief Health Officer, Western Australia, acting pursuant to Sections 197 and 198 of the Act that gives power for the purposes of emergency management during a public health state of emergency, to authorise a person to supply or administer a poison. Hereby authorise the persons occupying the class or position in column 1 of the attached schedule to perform the statutory functions in column 2 of the attached schedule, subject to the conditions, limitations, or restrictions, if any, set out in column 3 of the attached schedule. The schedule is attached as Annexure A. This instrument of authorisation takes effect immediately upon signing and shall remain in force until the public health state of emergency is no longer in force or otherwise amended or revoked. This instrument of authorisation is additional to the instrument of authorisation to supply or administer a poison, SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, number 6, 2021, dated this 22nd day of September 2021 at 21:26 hours. Dr. Andrew Robertson, Chief Health Officer. So they knew it was a poison all along. They knew that they were administering a poison. They used a state of emergency to administer that by force. Forced medical procedure. Forced medical experimentation of a poison. Of a poison. Of a poison. And in case you didn't hear me, of a poison. Now, when we look at this schedule, column 1, authorised officers, registered nurses who are employed by the Australian Defence Force. enrolled nurses who are employed by the Australian Defence Force, pharmacists who are employed by the Australian Defence Force, paramedics who are employed by the Australian Defence Force, medical technicians or the equivalent who are employed by the Australian Defence Force under some task force commander, Fruin, no doubt. Now, their functions: receive, possess and supply to the premises as determined by the Australian Federal Government. The premises. The premises. Receive, possess and supply to premises as determined by the Australian Federal Government. The premises. Administer to individuals at the premises to which the vaccines have been supplied in accordance with the policy and the national rollout strategy. Conditions, limitations or restrictions. Now, this is the Defence Force being forced a poison. We already acknowledged that in the first page of this contract, Ensure that each administration event is recorded. Administration event. The process of injecting you is an administration event. The event. Ensure that any adverse events are recorded in the Western Australian. So why is a successful one to go into the Australian and a failed one to go into the state? Carry out the functions in line with the requirements for supply and administration of Schedule 4 medicines in the Poisons Act 2014, to the extent that they are consistent with the authorisation, to the extent that they are consistent with the authorisation to administer a poison to a greater population by force, forced medical procedure done by employees of the Australian Defence Force considered to be authorised officers. Now, we can have a look through this pamphlet. I'm not going to. Let's move to the bottom of the pamphlet quickly. While they registered your event on the immunities register, they gave a company immunity from prosecution for administering a poison. Administering a poison signed off by the Chief Health Officer in an emergency at speed as determined by his very own signature, defining this to be exactly what it was defined as by all of us, a poison. So here we have hubs, corporate hubs, frontline healthcare workers to roll out the hub, the distribution hub, quarantine and border staff to shoot at you like they did that old man, almost killing him, but instead hitting the pillar of the car window, saving his life. No one remembers that, do they? These border control that shut down borders that don't exist at law, that shut down borders that were repealed in Clause 8 of the Constitution Act, sought to front-line healthcare workers, not emergency services, sought to front-line healthcare workers and border staff, residential aged care and disability residents and staff. That brings to the fore the previous video about Mark Butler. Right, so this last slide demonstrates that they planned this. They planned this before they put a state of emergency in play. If we look at the date of the pamphlet versus what's in it and define it to be a very wide and varied plan, we can see that these hot spots, locations to be confirmed pending advice from the states and territories, and expanding to more than 1,000 points of distribution worldwide, nationwide. More than 1,000 points of distribution nationwide. More than 1,000 points of commercial hubs by commercial entities that were given immunization from prosecution while they registered you on an immunization register. This is all evidence to demonstrate that they were well planned before any emergency arose, making this not an emergency. We can also see by the ideologies of the World Economic Forum and their forced industrial revolution, which includes all this eugenics and automated battery-driven AI technology, that this government is directly in step with all of this stuff, especially when the Defence Force is now pushing those driverless trucks and that sort of technology within defence. This is the defence contracts of those major players panning out in front of you while they take over everything going against the Constitution, using the United Nations as their stomping ground while ignoring all the rules that were put on the table to involve in those United Nations. This is a Hague offence. This is a Geneva offence. This is a criminal code offence. And they've quite openly put it on the record that they administered a poison that went on to cause harm to all Australians. And using the words of the engineer's case, when the people of Australia, to use the words of the Constitution itself, united in a federal commonwealth, they took power to control by ordinary constitutional means any attempt on the part of the National Parliament to misuse its powers. If it be conceivable that the representatives of the people of Australia as a whole would ever proceed to use their national powers to injure the people of Australia considered sectionally, it is certainly within the power of the people themselves to resent and reverse what may be done. No protection of this court is such a case is necessary or proper. Therefore, the doctrine of political necessity as a means of interpretation is indefensible on any ground. The one clear line of judicial inquiry as to the meaning of the Constitution must be to read it naturally in the light of the circumstances in which it was made, with knowledge of the combined fabric of the common law and the statute law which preceded it, and then lucet ipsa per se. Now, this would be in conjunction with another statement made within this very document. It is proper at the outset to observe that this case does not involve any prerogative in the sense of the word, to use the phrase employed by the Privy Council in Theodore v. Duncan, in which it signifies the power of the Crown apart from statutory authority. Though much of the argument addressed to us on behalf of the states rested on the prerogative, this distinction was not observed, but it exists, and so far as concerns prerogative in the sense indicated, it is unnecessary to consider it. In several recent cases, the Judicial Committee has had the broader question under consideration, as in Canadian Pacific Railway Company versus Toronto Corporation and Bonanza Creek Gold Mining Company versus the King. But in none of these was it found necessary to determine it. It is manifest that when such a question is involved in a decision, the nature of the prerogative, its relation to the government concerned, and its connection with the power under which it is sought to be effected may all have to be considered. Now that's the engineer's case, 1920. And this is very clear on that we the people have a right to stand up and tell these people in the government no more. You have poisoned the population. You have harmed the people of your constitution. No more. We have a right over and above the parliament when we use the words united in a federal commonwealth. We have a right of crown here that must be taken into consideration when it is brought up as a part of that defence. So according to their own laws, they're obligated to listen to what we have to say. And according to their own rulings, they decided to administer a known poison. Let me just repeat that before we sign off. They decided to administer a known poison. We put this up because it is evidence. That's the main reason here. We speak of the facts on the table, and we will no longer let these politicians run our lives like commanders of no line of authority that caused a war crime to occur. And now that they've been fully informed of those criminal offences, we start to see them scramble to try and cover their tracks. But it's too late. They already did what they did. They can't undo it. They can't take it out of those people's bodies. They can't reverse what they chose to go forward with. What they chose to go forward with. What they planned beforehand. What they had planned worldwide. What they had planned on behalf of corporations they gave immunity. They gave immunity to corporations that were involved in your poisoning. And this is a harsh reality to come to when it's in black and white before your very eyes, that they went to an emergency to administer a known poison.